welcome to Paperback Flicks.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're switching it up today because this time I'm Rae Davidson
I'm Ruth Craddock.
and we are talking to Alina and Samuel Dampt.
Hi, guys.
They co-wrote, the husband and wife co-wrote, I don't think you can actually see it, but that's
We'll,
okay.
we'll put it in post.
Daughter of Water.
Yeah, cool.
So, um, I kind of want to, before we get into questions, I kind of want to let you guys, however you want to do it, tell us about the book. Tell us your pitch for the story.
Okay, so Daughter of Water is an epic fantasy with a slow burn romance, and it really just kind of came out of my head. I started writing it on my own, and when I felt like I couldn't go any further with it, I signed up my husband to help me with it, and he really has helped edit, and we've built and drafted and just, I don't know, thrown it together. It's been a lot of years of work. But basically, you have your main character, Heidi. She's the daughter of water, and it speaks to her. So she can receive visions from the water, and she has gifts, and she learns that those gifts actually make her royalty. And she has to learn and understand what comes with all of that and overcome an evil that had her lose where she was supposed to be at her birth. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. So then the one of the first questions that I had
Yeah.
was the dynamic because I love my husband and we will work together, but
Yeah.
it's mostly like I tell him where to put the thing and he does the thing. Like, you know what I mean? So I kind of wanted to like know a little bit more about that, how it worked to have the pair of you writing together.
Sure. Yeah. So really it started, what would this have been like 4 or 5 years ago? It was pre-COVID. And I had kind of been writing. I had gotten probably 10 chapters into the book, and we did a vacation in France. I don't know how much you remember about this, but we went to France. It was my first time in France. I couldn't sleep on the plane because I can't, apparently. So it was like 15 hours. We get to France. I am just like completely out of it. And we're driving through. Everything's beautiful. I've never been to Europe. I've never seen green. I'm used to, desert Arizona. So it was like beautiful to me. Sam's from there, and so everything's kind of like he loves it, but he knew what to expect. But for me, it was just beautiful and wonderful, but I had had no sleep. And I we got to his grandparents' house. I went to sleep. We were all kind of just recovering the next day, and I had brought my laptop. I had written those 10 chapters, and I had kind of gone through it. We were resting. We had two little babies at the time, and so they were asleep. And I was kind of going through the draft, and I was so frustrated with it because maybe it's a lack of sleep from two babies or something like that. But I was going through the draft and I was like, I hate my main character. She's just bratty and rude. And like there were all of these things that were annoying me. So I pulled my husband in and I was like, okay, go through this with me. Like, tell me what I have to change. Give me some pointers, whatever. And we kind of sat down and talked about it, talked about like where I wanted the series to go, what the big plan was for it. And finally he was like, you know what, let me just like rewrite it for you and see if we can like make it go in the direction you want. And he rewrote the first chapter. And I was like, well, can you just do the rest of the book? Like, I'll do the first draft. We can talk about it and then just rewrite that. And then we'll just, pass it back and forth and see where it goes. And that was basically it. I kind of knew at that point, like, I'm a mom, I have mom brain, and I have this vision in my head, and I can't get the words out that I want to get out. And it was really frustrating. But I could hand it to him, and his brain was working normally. So I could go back and read what he had written, and it was just way better than anything I could have put together at the time. And so it kind of turned into this working relationship where then we would talk about, well, what about an idea for a book like this? And so we started working up all of these ideas and ways that we could improve this book and this series, and then other books that we could work on that we both had an interest in. And that's kind of where it's come to. Do you have anything to say on that?
Pretty much it.
Yeah.
So then, did you like obviously you had like the story in your head, you had kind of creative aspirations. Did you have anything like that or
Not for this one. This one's, you know, originally her concept for sure. Um, yeah, I'm the glorified editor. So it
It's a wonder.
was, you know, it's it was mostly like she said, working out character design and some plot issues and things like that, where it was like, um, she'd be like, why is the character coming across this way? And I'm like, well, it's because,
Which is what
XYZ.
It
So
was.
here you go, and so she was like, oh yeah, that's what I wanted. But um, the concepts are definitely from Alina. So
I feel like
yeah.
the other thing you really added was male characters. I'd
Mhm.
sit down to write them. I know how the boys like and men in my life act, but I don't know how to like process like make it make sense on page. So I'd write it and he'd be like, he wouldn't act like that. I'm like, I know, not really. But then he'd rewrite it and then I'd read it and would say something like, well, she wouldn't act like that. And he's like, well, how would she act? And so we'd have to like figure out, kind of what would make sense for both of those characters. And that was really helpful to
Yeah,
me.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Ruth, did you have any questions?
My husband and I actually wrote a screenplay together, so kind of understand what you're talking about, where the back and forth, you're like, this is as far as I could go, and then they hop on, and then they get to a certain point, and they're like, I can't go any farther, and it's a fun process. Did you guys really enjoy that? Was that kind of a bonding thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, the writing was after the kids went to bed with the little time you have after that. So some days were more enjoyable than others.
There were times where we made each other cry. Well, he made me cry because I was like, no, I really love that. And he's like, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, I want it to work because I loved it. But you just talk it out and come to the point where, yeah, this is gonna make the story what it can be, like the best that it can be. And it's really enjoyable. I mean, it really is those like he's been at work all day, I've been with the kids all day. We've done the dinner rush and it's rough, and finally everybody's in bed and then we have something to talk about or to work on together, to pass back and forth and to just bounce ideas off each other. And it helps you get to know each other better, I think, in a lot of ways. But it's also just like fun to talk because the alternative is you can like sit and watch a movie, but it's like you two being quiet for a few hours and then you're up for another 2 hours talking about how much you hated or loved the movie and like what worked and what didn't. And it's more, I thought it was more fun to do it with writing because it's our ideas and not just thinking about other people's ideas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've talked briefly before about the story that I attempted and I just don't like it. And so I took it to Scott and I was like, just read it, see what you think and see if have any way that you can improve it. And he was like, I don't know. Like he was like, I don't know what you can do. And
This
I'm
isn't my
like,
forte. Don't ask.
yeah. I'm like, did you like it? And he's like, I can see why other people might like it. I'm like,
You're like,
great.
that's not a good enough answer. That's not a good sign.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So
Oh,
not super helpful, but it's kind of helpful. I mean, a little bit.
a little bit.
yeah.
I know who my target audience is not. But
It's not Scott. There you go.
but
Yeah.
okay, well, working together to me that's just that's interesting to me. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm just not a good team player, even though I am, but not with creative things.
Yeah.
But there was also the publishing process because that's also something you have to work through together that
Yeah.
can cause strife. So we like to talk about the publishing the process that you go through because as we know, so many times you don't know what to do. You're like, here's my like amazing piece of work, and then people are like either gonna rip you apart or rip you off or whatever. And
Yeah.
so, for you guys, kind of what was your publishing story?
Well, we started off trying to be traditionally published, and I wasn't sure if we would find anybody who was interested because it's very I mean it's just a classic story. It's the the Lord of the Rings, like there's this big adventure and we're gonna start on this farm or just in the Shire. And then you're gonna be introduced to somebody and there's gonna be this big adventure and you're gonna overcome evil. And a lot of times when you're reading through querying pages or what everybody's looking for, it's very, we want something new, like not like that old stuff. And I love the old stuff. And I feel like sometimes I'm reading books and it's new stuff, which can be interesting, but I wish I was reading Lord of the Rings again or Narnia again or, those kinds of adventures. And so I finally sat down and I was like, okay, I'm going to write that because that's what I would want to read. But then when I went to query it, it was not what people were looking for. But I was like, you know what, we're going to send out, I think I decided on like 80. We're going to send out 80 queries, see what happens. We got really kind responses, but nobody was interested. And then we got one publishing house that was interested, but they wanted us to pay a certain amount of money to be able to get it through. But they said so many nice things about the book. It was, we love your main character and how all of this happens, just like, I think it was like 2 pages of just like nice notes about the book, but you'll have to
Was
pay this
nice.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice. But you'll
The
have to pay
deal
this
that was attached was not so nice,
yes.
but the cover letter
But
was nice.
yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey.
And so we got that, and I was sitting there looking at it, and I'm like, okay, I think it was like $6,000 that we would have to put up. And I was like, well, we could put $6,000 into getting art and making a website and doing all of these other things, and then we would get all of the return on whatever we could sell. So maybe we should just do that. And like, we won't have to let anybody else decide what the art's going to be or what the title will be of the book or how we should market it or if we have to change things because it's not, it doesn't hit the right expectations for the industry at this time and whatever. And so I just kind of decided, let's just go, like, let's try that. Like, we can put aside a certain amount of money or like try to do as cheap as we can, whatever. But there's no way we're going to hit $6,000 in putting this book together. And we can reap all of the rewards from our hard work on our own. And so then I just delved into formatting everything and organizing everything and finding an artist and a lot of it fell on me because he still works all the time. He funds it. He funds my dreams. So he funds the dreams and I put all of the extra time that I can into formatting and all of that comes with that book.
And I know we already said that we'll show it, but when you show it, you can look at the art. I love it when it's self-chosen. I love self-chosen or even self-made art because like we had the very first author interview that we ever did, she is awesome and she has a great story and it's a dystopian and she did more of like what you were talking about where she just had a company that said, yeah, we'll do it, and they chose the cover art and it didn't feel right for the story, and she ended up scrapping it and she had to redo the whole thing, and it was like a whole thing. So
yeah,
we know how that goes. We actually had another set of art for the cover initially, which maybe you can find on some of your
I still have
Instagram
it for
posts
sure.
or whatever.
But we had
I was like,
actually
that's
paid for
just
it,
not-
and everything, and we got the art back, and I was like, I mean, I kind of like it was kind
It was
of
pretty good. It wasn't.
yeah, it wasn't awful. It was kind of the romantic-y look on
Mhm.
like a front cover where it's very bold and there's like flowers and like a kind of moshy background.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it looked like it should be in a romantic-y section, which is there's nothing wrong with romantic-y, but our book is very slow burn. Like your kiss is near the end. So it didn't feel like it should be in that world. And so I was kind of frustrated because we had paid for it and I didn't love it. And we did have to go find another artist to do the work for us. But that was a long process of multiple weeks of me like waiting for the art to get done and then getting it back and being like, this is not really what I was looking for. And maybe I just didn't communicate it well enough, but then I got my second artist and it was like everything I wanted. So I was like, maybe I did communicate it okay.
Right.
Um, So yeah, that was kind of the journey with that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to throw in? Because I'll just keep
Well,
talking.
I've done the same thing, and I'm a cover artist, so I've worked for other people. That was one of the main reasons why I ended up self-publishing myself because I'm an artist as well, an illustrator. So I had a hard time with the notion of just handing over all the art to someone else. I'm a very visual person, and when I found out that most traditionally published authors have zero say in their cover, I was like, I don't think I can handle that. And then so I just got into doing it all myself and I went on to do it for other people. And yeah, like the ideal situation is you find a designer that will work with you and you get several back and forths and you can tweak things and you don't just pay for the first thing they send to you and it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm gonna have this. Like you want that right experience with somebody who's gonna work with you and try to understand what it is you want. And it's so important to have a book cover that actually fits the genre, but isn't exactly like every other cover in that genre. You want to be interesting and unique enough, but you don't want people being confused about what your genre is. Book covers are important. So I think that's really cool that you found that person eventually. You didn't have to go through too many people, at least. Two artists isn't too bad. That's good.
Right.
Very true. Yeah, our artist has been wonderful. I think at the time it was like around Christmas, and I was like, we're not going to find any, like, we wanted to get the book out. It had been a long process. And I found her out of nowhere, just like scrolling on Instagram. And I was like, yeah, she's probably doing other things for other people. But I just sent an email to see what would happen. And she was like, yeah, just like, I'll pay a little bit extra and I can get it done in 2 weeks. And I was like, great. And she got it done. And it was that back and forth and just really quick. And it was wonderful. Best
Cool.
experience ever.
Awesome.
That's pretty awesome. All right. So I like you mentioned a couple times that it's slow burn. So they had an Instagram post. It might have been other places too. I don't know. I saw it on Instagram and she was like describing it. She's like, if you like, and you must have put like 10 descriptors in there. It was so funny. But like I was like, wow, that really has something for everybody. But that felt pretty authentic. Like you feel like you kind of have a little something for everybody.
I think so. Do you have anything to say on
Well, it is like kind of you were saying, it's a very classic story, and that was part of the issue when we were querying was everybody wants like, morally gray hero or like a misunderstood villain and like these very modern things which we specifically set out to like not do
Mm-hmm.
because we're not into that. It's
Right.
like we watch, and that's like in all the TV now, and in all the movies, and in all the remakes of like all the old stories that you love, and then you rewatch it, and you're like, why did they butcher this character in this way? And so
Yeah.
we were like, we're not doing that, but that was what everybody wanted to see. They're like, for some reason in the traditional publishing sphere, that's like the hot thing,
Yeah.
it's like these very I don't know if edgy is the right word, but that's kind of what it feels
Right.
like, right? It's like these edgy themes. And so it is a very like classic good versus evil story. You know who's the good guy, you know who's the bad guy, you're rooting for the good guy, or at least we kind of hope you are. And yeah, and the romance is definitely a subplot. Like it's not the main plot line, but it's clean, it's traditional, and there are, if you're less into that stuff, it's okay because it's not like overbearing on the plot. I'm a guy. I'm not like that's not my
Yeah.
scene necessarily when I'm reading a book. So like
This was
that
very
was,
much,
and this was kind of
yeah.
the benefit I think that of co-writing it is it's like a give and take because she was like, well, we need like more in this section. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But it's
There
like,
needs to
okay,
be
okay, fine.
more
Like, what
on the
needs to be, but then the other side of that is if it was, I would read it. I'm like, okay, this is like, we're slogging through this at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, let's like do this instead. And so I think there is something for everyone in the book because, regardless of what you're more interested in, it's there, and
Hmm.
you can kind of latch on to the parts that you like better
Yeah.
and hopefully the rest isn't like painful. I don't think it is. I
yeah.
think I think all of it is pleasant to read, but
Yeah.
there are definitely parts that should appeal to anyone, unless you're really into that edgy like gray character kind of thing, maybe not your book,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
We were talking about that so a lot of what we do on our podcast is books that have had film adaptations.
Yeah.
We read the books, we watch the different adaptations, and then we discuss it. And we've been noticing, like, a lot of times, a lot of what we have to say is that felt derivative of,
Yeah.
or whatever. Like that's like,
Yes.
and like we were just talking about on our previous podcast, is kind of that same kind of thing where they suddenly make this character like a different ethnicity just for
Fun.
for mixing it up,
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever. They add like
Yeah.
a sexual connotation to something that wasn't
Never there.
necessary. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, I'm a mother of 4 daughters. I know Ruth, she's a mother of 18,000 kids. And
18,000 kids? I only have one more than you. Okay.
I know.
I have two genders, so that's all
Yeah,
I've got on you.
She's got the 4 boys and a girl. And so that
Yeah.
like I appreciate something that I can feel fine that my 11-year-old is reading, but I also know that my 19-year-old might have interest in it or whatever,
Right.
like something
Yeah.
like that. They're few and far between. I always think it's weird when a publisher or a producer or whatever is like, we need more grit. And you're like,
Yeah.
is
I
the
just
audience
know.
asking for
Yeah.
more grit?
I don't think
Yeah.
so anymore. I think they're
So-
tired of it.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of our thing was, it was, I mean, that's really in right now, it's just like, hey, it's a fantasy, but it's like borderline obscene, so there's just no need for it.
Yeah.
So,
And we have our 4 kids too.
yeah.
And we've kind of done the Harry Potter a little bit. They watch a lot of Pokemon, but we decided last year that we were going to go through Lord of the Rings, and they're kind of young for it. But I was like, we'll try it. If it's too scary, we'll stop and we'll go to something else. But we were watching it with them, and they just loved it, and there's darkness in Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of scary parts. There's a lot of, it's war. And you can still have all of that included, but still have good triumph, still have characters that are actually good people that you can root for. And I feel like that's the thing that's become so popular now is it's a character, they're doing the good thing. Are they doing it for the right reasons? We don't really know. Right. Or, they're the hero, but they're pretty prideful. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I've just the movies that we've watched with our kids have been very much on the side of the good and evil. There is good. You can know that. And I wanted people to be able to share this book with their kids, where it's wholesome. You can talk about it as a family. That's what I loved about Harry Potter. My mom would read every book we read first, before all the kids would read it. So Harry Potter, she'd read it, and then we'd all read it, and then we'd talk about it and have conversations. And I remember when we got to Twilight, and it was like the 4th book where there's some questionable things going on, and my mom reading it and kind of handing it to me like, I don't know that you need to read this. Right. And then I read it and I was like, I didn't need to read that. And it just making it this awkward, like we can't really talk about it as a family because it's weird, or there are weird connotations to what it's teaching, or just things like that. And I didn't want that in our book. I wanted it to be just family friendly, but there's still war. There's still bad that needs to be overcome, and you can learn how to overcome that through the characters.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, is there, like you mentioned Lord of the Rings, you mentioned a couple of things, is there like inspiration specifically that was derived, or is it just straight out of whatever's going on in your head?
I think the biggest inspiration for me is I actually looked this up, and you have like the Grimdark, which is George R. R. Martin, is that his name? Like his stuff is the Grimdark, but you can also have Noble Dark and Noble Bright. And it's the Noble Dark is this idea that the world, there's darkness that exists in the world, but your characters are noble and they're going to fight for the good thing, even if the world is against them and it's going to be hard. And that's to me what Lord of the Rings is there's this evil in the world and you have to fight against it. And the characters, they're going to be noble and they're going to fight for the good thing. And that's the biggest tie that I see between the two. There are centaurs in our book, and there are some like mermaids, some other like Tolkien-esque, that medieval, genre kind of fantasy, but not directly tied from his stuff. There's a whole new race of people called Verdalia, which is what she is, and they have their own seasonal magic. that they can use, and it's completely different from Tolkien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. All right. Am I
I think it's a good thing that you wrote sort of a family friendly thing. When I started writing my first book, I wasn't planning on my kids reading it. And then, like, as they got older, they're like, oh, well, mom writes books, mom published whatever. They're like, well, we want to read your books. I'm like, you're not quite old enough. You're not quite mature enough. And then when my oldest son, he's 17 now, he started reading it like last year. I was like, okay, I had to make sure he was ready because it has some dark stuff in it. It's not it's clean-ish. It's mostly clean, but it deals with some really dark subjects and some really bad things happen to young people in it. So I was like, okay, like make sure you understand. And he read the first book, he loved it, and then the second book, I'm like, okay, the second book gets worse. It gets even worse. And there's gonna be a part where you're gonna hate me. And like he read it, and when it came to that part, like he's in the middle of the book now, but it's towards the middle of the book that it happened, and that part happens. And he came to me, he's like, "Mom," I'm like, did I traumatize you for life?" He's like, "A little bit." I'm like, I'm sorry," and I was like, "It's okay." And we talked about it and everything, and he's over it. But it was like, yeah, I think it helps if you plan for that. I wasn't really planning on that. My kids were all like tiny, tiny when I started writing these books, and I was writing them for me. Um, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change the books, but I probably would write something different for them. But
Yeah.
it is important to know like what your who your audience is and who do you want to read this. And I think especially if you're so I don't know what your guys' philosophies are about being an author and being LDS. Some people feel like if you're LDS, you have to also write LDS fiction, and you can only write about being LDS. I do not agree with this. I don't read that stuff. That's not for me. I'm a fantasy person. Sci-fi and urban fantasy. I like to escape. I'm LDS every day. I don't need to live in an LDS world when I'm reading or when I'm writing. And like I do still want to promote the same kind of ideals, but I don't want to scare people away that aren't of my faith or of different faiths and different ideals. I want them to still be able to enjoy my characters and see their value, regardless of whether they believe the same things I do or not. Like you want it to be a little more accessible to everybody, but you also don't want to compromise your ideals. You want to feel like you're proud of what you wrote. Do you feel like you accomplished that with your book?
Any thoughts?
I mean, I think so. The book is um I think it addresses themes that are, you know, serious. Although it's appropriate, it's family friendly. We've been talking about that. I don't know that it's certainly not a kid's book. At least I wouldn't think of it that way. I think it's on the older side of young adult or epic fantasy kind of a thing, just because it's longer and a little more involved, and there's some things like that. Now it's perfectly fine to read with kids, but it's not like the early Harry Potter books, in my opinion, which have a very like much
That middle
younger,
grade.
young, yeah,
Yeah.
middle grade,
Yeah.
like kind of kids vibe. As far as, the themes, I think they obviously are based on traditional moral values, because that's where we come from in that sense, and we wanted to promote those things. And because it's a good versus evil story, I mean, the good lands on the side of those traditional moral values, and the romance is anchored in kind of those things, and um, but it's definitely not overbearing. I mean, there's not
I
even.
don't think you could ever guess that we were LDS reading it.
Yeah, you might guess that we
You
were
might guess we
like,
were
you
Christian.
might guess we were religious, but
Yeah.
there's
And
definitely,
that's
I don't
fine.
think we would
There's
ever be
nothing
able
wrong
to
with it.
pin down a denomination.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that wasn't the point, right? Like this is a fantasy book.
Hmm.
It's something different. So we wanted it to have that. Like we wanted the themes to be like, no, we want our heroes to be not morally gray. We want them to be like
They're trying their
morally
best.
like weak. It's
Right.
aspirational. Like the hero, you know that my thing with the fantasy books that I've always read or that I read growing up was, you know, you want to like want to be like the hero. And so when the hero's this guy who's like the anti-hero and he's kind of like he's the hero despite himself or like kind of a loser or kind of like wow, you like stumbled into the shoes of the hero on accident because of these, you know, circumstances outside of your control. Although the story can be entertaining, like it's not aspirational. So it's hard to like really be like, wow, I wish I was that hero. Like let me put myself in the position of the hero. And we didn't want that. We wanted people reading to be like, wow, I wish I could be the hero because it just makes for a better read, in my opinion. Like you want to immerse yourself in the story. Whereas if you're like, wow, that seems like kind of a mess, I'm gonna like distance myself from what's on the page. So we hope that people that read it see that and feel that way. I guess we'll have to find out. You know, I don't know that enough people have read it for us
Yeah.
to
I was
to
gonna say,
know,
did
but
you use beta readers or
We had some family members and a few friends that beta read for us, which was very valuable because you, even with the two of us going back and forth, you miss things where it's
yeah,
like, oh, and a lot of it is because you're talking about it all the time. So you're like, oh, yeah, people already know that because we know that.
right.
And then people would read it, or family members, whatever, they would read it as beta readers, and they're like, uh, I'll give like a small example that doesn't really make a huge difference in the book, but one of the characters has a niece, and he promises her a birthday present at one point. And everybody got to the end of the book, and they were like, "What was this birthday present? Like, you never told us what he gave
Like
her."
it doesn't matter.
And I was like, "Who cares?" That was not a big deal.
Yeah.
But and this is kind of the Brandon Sanderson thing, where he says, if you make a promise, there needs to be a payoff.
Mhm.
And it was such a little thing when I was writing it. I wasn't thinking much about it. But that was one of the questions. Every single person that read it was like, "Excuse me, what did he give her for her birthday?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess I'll put that in there or just take that out so there's no like birthday thing happening because it didn't really matter." But it mattered enough to everybody reading it that it was like, make sure to get that in there because I'm at the end of the book and I'm wondering what happened.
Right.
And so yeah, we did have beta readers and there were things like that that came back that it was like silly little things like that where it's like, okay, I can throw that into a conversation somewhere and then everybody will be happy. But then bigger things where it was like, okay, I get that this is going on with the plot, but I'm not feeling it yet. Like either put it later or make something happen sooner. Especially with the romance at one point. It was just it, and part of this was my fault because when I started writing the book, the people that end up together did not end up together when I started writing it. And then I started writing it and I was like, no, that's not what's going to happen anymore. Just as I wrote it. And so I had to go back to those early chapters and just kind of figure out how to make it work right for the plot. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So another thing that he would talk about is that like I guess he is super into like explaining the magic or explaining the politics or whatever. And his number one feedback for a long time was, "Where's the peril?" And he's like, "Well, can't you just learn magic for magic's sake?" I'm like, "No, imperil it." Like,
Yeah.
and so did you guys kind of run into that? Like, there's the little things like you were saying, like with the present, but
Yeah.
did you run into that where like you were like, "Oh, right, I'm so focused on the romance that I forgot the story," or "I'm so focused on the politics of the situation," or whatever? Did you find yourselves doing that,
A little
or
bit. I
yeah,
think
Yeah.
the biggest thing was Alina is a big planner,
I plan everything.
huge planner. So she has like slideshows
I
and
had a
stuff like
500 and something page
multi-hundred page like
slideshow.
slideshows of like the creatures in her world and like what they did and where they lived and then it's been like the different flowers, like what the flowers do and what they can be used for and that was one of the big things that when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like so much exposition about
mm-hmm.
all this stuff that's not, it doesn't even come up in book one.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so I was reading it and it was like, there was some tension because it was like, I was like, look, this has to go. And she's like, no, like we have
No,
to,
this creature is really
I'm
important.
like, we have to
Like
include
in a
it.
few books.
And I'm like, it's gotta go. Like there's just too much, and it's not really that
Mhm.
it's not relevant right now. And I think part of that was because also Lena's a big Harry Potter fan, and J.K. Rowling obviously has now possibly the biggest fan base on the planet in terms of
Yeah.
authors, and has been able to do a lot of cool stuff, like, you know, books entirely dedicated to the magical creatures out of her
Right.
book, and books dedicated to this.
The
And
Quidditch book.
I
That,
think she was thinking, well, I want to do that,
Yeah.
and I'm like, great,
Right.
but
Separate. Yeah.
like first the story has to be compelling, and if people love it, then at some later point you can be like, hey, here's all this extra stuff, but it wasn't always necessarily story related.
Yeah.
So now then on the other hand, I was probably overly eager to like cut to the
Cut
quick and
lots of things.
get to the plot, so it
Yep.
was kind of the
And this
back
is
and
where the
forth
two of
between.
us really worked together because I am very much the dream. I have all the ideas. I'm like, this symbolizes this, and like they don't need to know that, but like it in my head it works. And then when people get to book 3, they'll get this symbolism. Like it'll click for them. But I have these big dreams and these long lists of everything that's gonna work together. And then he can go, okay, but the plot for book 1, we've gotta tie it. Like it has to be a nice, pretty package. And I'm like, okay, so we only need this, and then we can add this in later. And it really helps to have two people working at that with completely different. Because he's not. I wouldn't say you're a dreamer or
Well, I
like the
wasn't in
big
your head. Like
visionary.
you had
Yeah,
all this
Yeah.
stuff in your head where
yeah,
and so in that context, I was an outside reader, and so I'm reading the story, and I'm like, it's either not making sense or it's too much,
Mhm.
and I could kind of just be like, it's just too much,
yeah.
and she's like, yeah, well, this is all this stuff that I'm like, that sounds awesome, but like, it's not actually for this book.
So 100% hold on to all of that and do that. Do like
Yes.
the almanac or whatever. Like do like the
Yes.
separate thing
Oh, I would
because
love to. It would be
some of
so
us
fun.
will love that.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, I like those, like I
Yeah.
think they're cool growing up as a kid. Like my cousins always had those, it was like they were like big Star Wars fans, and so it's
Yeah.
like they had like the almanac of the Star Wars this and the that and the whatever, and I'm not like huge into Star Wars, but it was always like fun, like flipping through,
Mhm.
like, but it wasn't like the mainstream book, right? It was like all this
Right.
extra stuff that's cool, but not necessarily
It doesn't matter
addressed
right
in
now.
like
Yeah.
the main story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. All right. I think we're gonna put all the plugs in at the end.
Yeah.
But before we start wrapping up, were there any other questions that you had?
Would you consider selling the rights to this if it got to that point? And like, would you want to be a creative part of it if it was developed into a movie or a TV show? Or like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so we have talked about that. I think we would, but we would definitely want to have. I mean, I know Alina would for sure want to have a lot of creative control on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And he's the lawyer, so he's like, well, you have to get the paperwork right if you
Right.
want that to happen.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've just seen a lot of media going places, where you're like watching it and you're expecting one thing, and there's a lot the creative liberties get almost outside of the scope of creative, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what is going on here? It's like,
Yeah.
and we definitely wouldn't want that for this book, and because of what we set out to do with it,
Hmm.
especially, and what we've seen when we were querying it for traditional publishing, we're kind of like we would be very cautious if we ever did that because I just think that the kind of default setting is we're going to turn this into a modern story, and it was never meant to be that. It will never be that. That's just not what we set out to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't read it yet, obviously. So this is my copy, but I just got it tonight, like right before this. So I haven't started reading it yet. But it sounds like it's not like age specific, it's more timeless. Is that kind of the intent that it sounds like?
Yes.
We sure hope that is the review we get.
Yes.
Well,
That's what we want.
that was my preemptive assumption null review.
Perfect.
But okay, so anything else that you guys would want audience to know, whether it's future writers or whether it's just readers, just the potential readers out there to know.
I don't know. I don't know about the readers. I think we've probably said about everything. For writers, I mean, I would just say write your story. That's the number one thing. And it's hard. I mean, I can't tell you how many nights it was like we would get the kids to bed, and we were just like, we should go work on the book, and we're like,
Or
we
we could
don't
just go
want
to
to, like we
bed.
should just watch a movie or go to bed or whatever. So it's hard, but like obviously the first step in if you're gonna try to do this is to actually get a book finished. And we're working on other stuff, and I have another like standalone thing that I've been working on and haven't touched in months because like that's
We've
just
been
how it
focusing on
goes. And
this, and yeah.
it's like I've been saying, I think every night for the past 2 weeks, like, all right, I gotta get back into that. And then I don't do it. And so I would say that's number one. Obviously we have the benefit of being able to write with each other.
So we could take breaks, which was
Mhm.
nice. I could focus and then he could focus. One thing I would say to that though is before I ever wrote this book, I wanted to prove to myself that I could finish a book. And so I decided I would take a month. Like it was kind of a NaNoWriMo thing, like get those 50,000 words
Mhm.
down. And I did a nonfiction book. It was something on homemaking, just my own ideas on it and how you could be a better homemaker. And then I did one on homeschooling, probably a year later. And it was just to prove myself I could get those 50,000 words down, I could organize it, and then I could format it and create my own cover. And I just created two books and I pulled them off the market because I don't believe everything in them anymore. Um, but at the time, it was just if I can get this project done, I can prove to myself I can get this project done. So then when I did the first draft of that, I think that came out to like 80,000 words when I wrote the first draft. But I knew I could do it because I'd already done it and I'd done a smaller project. And so if you have to start with that smaller project, so if you want to write just a normal novel that's around 50,000 words, start with a short story or something just to prove you can finish something and be happy with it. And then you can move on to that bigger project that you're really excited about. And that was kind of this story for me. It was a story I mean, it started with Tinkerbell, where I was like, I like fairies and I like elemental fairies and I want to do something with seasons. And so I kind of just took the time to build it up in my mind. And it's completely different than what I started with. But because I'd done those earlier projects, I knew I could finish. And then having a husband who was willing to help me made it so much easier to jump in later and do all of the editing and put it all together because I knew I'd done it before and it had been a few years since I formatted, but it was still kind of there and I had the confidence that I needed to move forward with it. So get a first project done.
And on that last point, I would say don't be afraid to make some major changes when you go and reread because
Yeah,
there were like this version is very different. Even not
absolutely.
not even only just from what was in Alina's head, but like the first written draft. Like
Yeah,
there are some like
huge
significant
changes.
character and plot changes, which initially we were like, oh, it's gonna be so much work. But it needed to get done just for the benefit of the story. So
And I can honestly say that I love the story now. Like I didn't have to give anything up. It became better because I cut things and I added things and I mean I tore the book apart to get to where it is. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Awesome.
So
Okay,
that
wait a second here, real quick. So you like Tinkerbell? Is that what you
Yeah, the
said?
little kid Tinkerbell movies.
Yeah. Do you agree that Disney should be forced to finish the series?
Yes, absolutely.
I feel
I
like
think
it should end when
they're
she meets Peter Pan and they become buddies. I feel
yes,
like
absolutely.
I love those movies and I feel totally betrayed that they have not finished it.
I know.
And I'm like, honestly, Disney, do the good stuff. Stop doing the
They're
bad
so
stuff.
good.
Come on.
They're so good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love fairies, so it makes me extra interested in reading and seeing what you guys came up with and what you made together. That's really cool.
thanks.
Awesome, thank you.
Also, is it like a one-off or is it part of a series?
It's part of a 4 book series, and
Okay.
I have the outlines, so
All
they're
right.
ready to go.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Okay.
Are you like have some kind of timeline for when the second one's going to come out, or you still kind of in the planning process for it?
So I'm almost finished with the first draft of book two. And
Okay.
so once that's done, it's getting handed off to him, depending on how fast he can write through
No
draft
problem, yeah.
two. We'll see. But we actually, once we got into the groove of things, we work pretty fast. So I'm hoping within the next year or two, we'll have the
Yeah.
next book ready to go. And by then I'll be into book three while he's finishing book two. So
Yeah.
hopefully it goes
Awesome.
pretty quick.
That's super cool. So I also wanted to mention, so we're gonna get this out tonight, right now. Is it still in pre-sale or is it? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's still in pre-sale till the end of
And
the
we're
month.
we're gonna get this out in good time for when it launches, but go ahead, let us know all the dates and for this one, for this book.
Yeah, so end of February will be when the pre-orders technically close. We'll probably keep it open. But right now the paperback is on sale for 30% off and the ebook is 50% off. So it's a great time to get your hands on it, just in case those go away.
That's the other thing when you're doing it, when you're publishing yourself, you can make those choices.
Yeah,
Exactly.
all my decision.
So
And
Out
I
the
like
box.
giving away the book for a little bit cheaper, so
yeah, so that was the thing that I was talking about where she was giving all the different descriptors and she's like, if you like this, if you like this, and she was listing off all the different elements that are in it, and it was a giveaway. And I was like, oh, pre-sale, and then I'm like, wait, giveaway?
yeah. Just a
So,
pause.
but the thing is now is that this is mine, and maybe it's like oldest child syndrome or whatever, but I don't like to share even with my kids. So they're gonna have to get their own. So I'm totally that person. I'm like, but what if you bend the corners or whatever?
No.
So
That's heresy. No corner bending. Bookmark, please.
exactly. So, all right. Well, it's Alina and Samuel Dampt, and we'll be sure to put all the information up. We'll get all the tags and the links and whatever, but anything that you wanted to say, have it out there if you have like a website or an Amazon link or blah, 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 blah.
Oh, sure. So you can get the book on Amazon. You can also get the book on our website. It is cheaper on our website because it pays us better to be able to do it direct sale to you. We are signing all of our copies that are going out in the pre-order period. So yeah, now's the time to do it. And we'll eventually probably go to, Barnes and Noble and all of the others, but we really wanted to keep it for ourselves to start.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Very cool.
Awesome.
All right. And assuming, so she does all the editing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but we'll have it up on the screen. We'll have it in the description.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Sounds good.
Just
So-
let us know what you need from us, I guess, and we can
Yeah.
get it available for you.
Well, cool. So I'm really excited about this. I know that I tend to be like, yay, that's amazing about like everything, but some things, and Ruth knows, because so I did the same thing when Ruth she told me about the books and then she finally published it, and I'm like, you're published? Like I was like, we have to get it now. Like
Yeah.
so there are some things that I get very excited about, and part of it is knowing the authors. Part of it is
That's
like
cool.
these are my people, even if they're not my people, but they are now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, part of it is that, and like we mentioned Brandon Sanderson. I've never met the man, but I feel like he's one of my people, or I'm one of his people in the auxiliary,
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. That's kind of I like that. I'm more intrigued to see what else you're coming out with, or, I'm more excited about the next one because I've gotten to know either them through their work, in the case of Sanderson, or like I see them, they're real people and they're talking to me and they're giving me advice, even if it's through the screen. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad we got the opportunity to do this.
No, thanks
It's
for
really
hosting
fun.
us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's nice to know authors are real people too. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes
We
it
have
all
to
that
keep
cooler.
that.
You're like, another human being actually wrote this. It didn't just fall out of heaven. It's like very
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Or come out of a group like, who
Yes.
thinks that the character should do this?
True.
I took one of those classes and I'm like, I am out of here so hard. This is not my speed.
That's funny.
Well, cool. Well, it was really nice to meet you guys, and I'm excited to read it. I'll definitely go and get it. And so it's officially coming out at the end of February, or
It's out now. The
okay,
pre-order period is until the end of February. Yeah.
all right,
So it
very
might
cool.
go longer. We'll see.
So,
We'll see how we feel.
and when there's something else, come back and we'll talk about that one.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Of course,
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
so
We're
the
into
next
it.
why
one will
not?
hopefully be a standalone,
Mhm.
different everything.
It's gonna be much smaller. It's a
And then,
fairy tale retelling.
Ooh,
and
that's
then
cool.
yeah,
Really
then the
excited
next,
about.
then hopefully book 2 on that one.
Yeah.
Well,
Cool. Well, we're happy to
you
have
never
Rocky
know
time.
with these things. You know?
Yeah. We'll see.
Come pick out a book that's had a film adaptation. You can come discuss that with us too.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the
that'd
other
be great.
thing.
Yeah.
I like to hear people who are in that creative space. I like to hear what you have to say. That happens a lot with Ruth, where like she'll
Yeah.
sit there and she'll say, you know, when you're developing a character, and I don't know because I
Yeah,
haven't been there yet.
been
You know,
there
like I
yet.
She's
haven't gotten
working
down.
on it. She's a writer in training. She
Yes.
is a writer. She just
Yeah.
hasn't realized it yet.
The little tadpole writer.
I just
Yes.
haven't found a way to love it yet.
Yeah.
You'll get there.
I'll
I
keep
believe in you.
I'll keep manipulating it until I do.
Yes.
I'll live in it until I love it. But
Well, there's some parts of writing
That's
that you
fine.
like more than others. You know, like Alina's really into dialogue. I'm really
And I
not.
love
You know, so it's like,
You know, we've talked about that actually because it's like how your brains work. So I narrate everything to myself in my head, and I don't know if you guys, if that's a girl
I
thing.
do.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
like when I get to dialogue, I can get going because I can do the British accents in my head, and so I'm, I just it's going and flowing, and then I'll like talk to him, and he's like, "Well, no, you can like see everything like it's like a movie screen," and I'm like, "No, I can't. It's foggy. I can't see anything." So yeah, that has been kind of writing the book has
so
been
the
interesting
dialogue
because of
stuff is
that.
like
Yeah,
a slog for me, but she loves it. So it's like,
Yep.
That's cool.
Perfect. Cool. All right.
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for
thanks so
coming.
much.
This is
It's been
awesome.
fun.
And everything we'll link we can even link over like the site so people can just click right there and
Yeah.
head
Yeah.
on over
Great.
and see all the other stuff that they've got going on and whatever. I don't know what's over there. I'll have to check it out
Yeah.
myself.
Awesome. Yeah.
But yeah.
Sounds great.
That'd be great.
Awesome.
All right.
All
Nice
right.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys too. It's always fun to meet Ray's other friend people out there. I've known her a long time, so it's nice to know she has a life besides me.
Yeah. So right. So Ruth and I have been friends since we were like 12.
Okay.
And we're a minute older than 12 now.
Yeah. So are we.
Barely. Just 1 minute.
But yeah, so it is kind of cool to kind of see inside because when we started doing this, like I'm
Yeah.
like I don't know what to do or what
Do I put my
We're still in that space.
I
You know,
know.
it's like,
look our first interview Rochelle Lee and we were like I was like, you know what, if we could just do it again, like I would 100% just do it again. She's like, all right, something else and we'll try this again.
Yeah.
So you're getting us a few interviews in.
That's good.
So hopefully
A little more comfortable.
yeah, hopefully it makes a little more sense this time. It's great.
Yeah. Well, you have your setup and everything. You're just ready to go.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awesome.
My Timu tree behind me.
It's nice.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, quick reminder, our next podcast is The Secret Garden.
Mm-hmm.
At least the Maggie Smith film. We'll see how many others we can get to.
Ray will watch all of them for you. So if you
We'll
don't
watch
want
all
to
of them
watch
for-
all the adaptations, Ray most likely will watch the vast majority, if not every single one that's ever existed.
It's very true. I don't know how many of you remember Pride and Prejudice, but
Well, it's one of our first ones, and like you deep dived
I
way
did.
in there.
Did you do the zombie one?
Of
I
course, yeah.
admire your
So,
willingness.
I forget how many it was. I watched 23 versions.
Oh wow!
good enough.
I didn't even know there were that
I'm
many.
sorry. Maybe I
It's like, I didn't
found
even know there was
23
that many
versions.
versions. Sheesh.
I watched something like 18 or 19 versions.
Wow, that's impressive.
It was intense.
Because she's Ray. She just deep dives into stuff. She gets into something and she just gets crazy.
I love that.
Eat it. Yeah.
And,
That's
I
what
love
the
that
best
about her. So she gets to do that. She gets to be the crazy researcher,
Yeah.
and I get to, Awesome. That's so cool. Thanks for doing that for me.
And then I come on camera and I say all the wrong names of the actors because I'm a genius.
And then we fix it in post because that's what we do. We never remember the names when we're talking about it because that would be too easy. I mean,
Well, and oddly enough, so we were talking about doing, sorry, it's gonna go on forever, but we were talking about doing, like if you would sell your rights or if you'd want to have a lot of creative license. So, talking about Pride and Prejudice, my very favorite of all of them that I have witnessed,
Yeah.
the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. It's a web series.
Oh,
And it
okay.
is modern day, and it's just a girl talking to her camera in her room, and she's
Okay.
Lizzie Bennet.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the whole story play out in the modern era through
Like
her
her
vlog,
voice.
basically.
That's
interesting.
And
Yeah,
her
I
sisters
haven't
come
watched that one.
in, and like it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
But I was stunned because I don't like modern remakes. I usually am like, just let it be what it is. I was blown away that I was like, you know
That's
what?
funny.
Jane Austen would like this series.
Yeah.
You're like, that's a high compliment.
Yeah. So oddly
That's
enough,
fun.
it could be the weird thing.
Good
It
to
could,
know,
you know,
yeah.
you never know.
Should
You
look
do the
into it
indie
now.
film and it turns into like this icon indie book to indie film.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the way to go. All right.
That's funny.
And then you can come back when it's a film and we'll talk about it as a film in your book and like the whole journey, like in 10
That would
years
be
or whatever.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great. Well, if you guys know anyone in the industry,
Yeah.
I was gonna say we've got a couple of potential leads.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All
I
right.
have a brother that works in the movie industry, but he's on the set building side, so I don't think he's really got that kind of connection.
Well, he's that much
That's
closer
cool.
than any of us. So.
That's true. That is true.
That's so cool.
Well,
All right. Well, for Paperback Flicks, I'm Rae Davidson.
I'm Ruth Craddock.
We've got Alina and Samuel Dampt with us tonight, and have a good night, guys. We'll see you around.
Yay!